It's really an honor to be here. I don't know, I just love sharing what I know. I've been doing this for a long time. And I just like sharing the information I've gathered and the ideas I've gathered to hopefully help you get further along the path. I see this all as a path. And it's a path that I've been walking with gongs for 50 years. I bought my first gongs in 1974. Yeah, well, I don't know, I'm old. But, you know, and I still have those gongs. I bought 5 of them, and I still have them, and I still use some of them regularly. All right, this will be fun. It's going to be sort of a two-parter. I'm going to talk about myself and some various aspects of the gongs in that first, and then if you all have a handout, that'll be the second part, where I explain what I actually do and how you can apply the same ideas to what you do. Not necessarily copy me, which I always tell my students, don't copy me. There's only one me, and I'm the best one there is, you know? So don't copy me, but I try to help all my students find their own way on their path. And I think that's what's really important. Especially here, we're not talking about being in a rock band or something, where you want to learn all the U2 songs and then go out and play in a band or something. This is very different. And it's very individual, as we can tell when we listen to each other. And like Annika, wasn't that beautiful?
Yes.
I loved it. That was really beautiful. And I'm sitting there thinking, maybe I should play more like that, because I don't play at all like that. But then that's not my nature. So we each need to follow our own nature. And that's what's beautiful about coming to a gathering like this, is we can get a lot of ideas that we can take home. And not necessarily copy exactly, but we can put our own spin on them. And say, yeah, I really like that thing they played. What if I kind of did it this way? And that's how I learned a lot of what I do, is by taking things and kind of changing them and fitting them into what I do. And we see that a lot, you know, Mitch talks about lineage. And I think that's important, is that, you know, we're all learning from each other. But to take things that you learn from somebody else, and you make them personal. And that's what I've done. I'll give you a quick history of me, because I could talk for hours about, you know, where I'm from and how I got here. But I started really, like I said, it's 1974. I bought my first gongs. I was playing progressive rock music. And all of my heroes on drums had gongs in their setups. The drummers were like King Crimson and Yes, Emerson and Palmer, Soft Machine on the rock side. And then there was the European improvised music scene, which I was very into. Drummers like Pierre Favre from Switzerland, Andrea Centazzo from Italy, Baby Summer from Germany. A lot of these musicians also expanded their drum set with gongs. So that got me interested in gongs as a sound to use. And as I started using them with my bands, I noticed, like, I like this. I like this sound. It does something to me. And I'm sure you had that experience. Maybe the first time you heard a gong or played a gong, you said, whoa, what is that? So I kept playing the gongs for myself and using them in the bands. And it just became something that totally intrigued me. And I tried to find out more. Now, back then, there was no internet. There was no YouTube. There was no information really on gongs other than what the Paiste company had out there. They had a couple of books called Percussion Profiles, which were sort of catalogs. They had all their artists in there, with pictures and descriptions of their setups. So that was my Bible. I would go through that and look at all these players and see what type of cymbals and gongs they had. And they had lists of some of their recordings. So I was going to the record store. You remember records? They're making a comeback, right? I would go there, and I was the kid who ordered all the weird stuff because I'd order all these European albums, and I didn't know what they sounded like. Again, there was no communication like the internet or anything. So I would just order these albums, and then I'd get them, and then I'd try to figure out what they were doing, because there was no video to go along with it. So a big part, I grew up in a small town in the Midwest of the US, sort of isolated in a way. So I had to just make up everything on my own. I was a drummer, so I did study. I took private lessons. I studied and played all through high school and college, and after that, studied with other people. Mostly drums, mainly drums. So what I had to do when I really got into the gongs was take my drumming technique and adapt it. Because, you're playing drums, you're playing horizontal, right? You're playing gongs and you're playing vertical. So sort of the same technique, but I had to make some adaptations. And then, unbeknownst to me, there were other people in the US playing gongs, but again, there wasn't that communication we have today. Mitch Nurr and Richard Brutus were on the East Coast playing gongs and bowls and doing this whole thing. Don Conroe and Christopher Tree were on the West Coast doing all sorts of things. And here I was in the Midwest, and I knew nothing about any of them. Because it wasn't like a rock band that would be really big and it'd be in magazines and on television. So I didn't know about them until much later, really probably into the mid to late 90s, when I first heard of Don. And then I found he was on a TV show in New York and doing his thing, and I got a videotape of the TV show, and so I listened to that and studied it and tried to figure out stuff he was doing. And then much later, I heard of Mitch and Richard. Christopher Tree was a Paiste artist, so he was in the Paiste books. And I knew about him. And I looked at pictures of his stuff, and he would have he had 20 huge gongs everywhere. And he had timpani, and he had cymbals, and he played flutes and everything. And he had this crazy hair, and half the time he didn't have any clothes on hardly, so he was kind of a crazy looking guy. This is pretty freaky. This is great. What kind of sounds is he making? Fortunately, he did put out a record that I managed to get a hold of, and listening to that, and it's like, this is intriguing, what he's doing. So that started to give me some direction. And then I wrote to the Paiste company about other people in the catalog. I says, can you send me some information on these people and that people? And they sent me their catalogs, and they sent me, some information. And later on, I started writing letters to people. And that took forever. Especially to Europe. I'd write a letter to somebody in Europe, and months later, I might get a reply, so very slow communication. But, you're so lucky today because you have gatherings like this, you have the internet, and you have YouTube with 1 million videos, and you have people with websites with all kinds of information. So you could just go on your computer and find out just about anything you want to know. But back then, it was really difficult. So I had to do a lot of searching, and I bought a lot of records, and I sort of had to reverse engineer everything because I couldn't see what they were doing. I could only hear what these people were doing, and I had to figure out how they made the sounds. Luckily, I might find a picture of them playing, and I could see that sort of mallet or whatever they had. But again, I had to sort of reverse engineer all of this in my imagination. because information wasn't out there. But fortunately, I had my percussion technique, and like I said, I just kind of took it from there and started exploring things. And then later on, the internet hits, and I start to be able to contact people. People have websites, there's more things available, and it grows from there. But for me, it was just, I was all by myself. I was sort of a Gong island, really, just trying to figure this out and figure out why does playing these gongs make me feel so good? Why does it do something to me? Because it really did. Now, going up to later, about 2000 is when I stopped playing in bands. I've been playing in bands of all types, all kinds of music. And it's like, okay, I played drums for 30 years. That's enough. And what's new? I couldn't find anything new to do, really. But it's like, I want to do something completely different. So I started playing mainly the gongs and percussion along with it. I built this crazy drum set built on my idea of gamelan music. I had, 8-tune tom-toms set up like the gamelan row gongs. And I played melodic ideas on that. And I had a big wall of gongs behind me, and all kinds of other shakers and rattles. And I started touring around playing solo concerts, which was really fun. And that's when I was younger, like Mike, when I could still haul around like, 5 tons of gear. But I was bringing all this stuff, and it was crazy, but it was a lot of fun. And people were really reacting to it in a positive way. And that just encouraged me to do more and more. And as I kept going, these guys, they kept calling even more and more. So eventually the drums disappeared and it just became metal instruments. And I just have an affinity for metal. I love ringing metal of just about any type. So that's kind of a quick history of how I got here. And again, the big thing, is find your path and walk it. That's the best advice I can give you. And you'll meet people along the path who will influence you, and they might point you in other directions. I've had many people I've met on the path who pointed me and said, you need to look at this. You need to listen to this. And it starts to open up for you even more and more. And as you walk the path more, it gets wider, and more people come into your circle, and it just, it's an endless thing. So I keep walking, and I walk every day with the sound, with the gongs. I have some notes here because I figured I'd better get some notes. Because what happened, I'd like to thank Mike and Mitch and Thomas for teaching half of what I was going to talk about already. So this will probably talk about 10 more minutes, and then we get an early break. We'll see. I did all my stuff. No. So let's. One thing I want to talk about is I saw in the WhatsApp about Stockhausen. People were kind of commenting on that. Just to give you a little history on Stockhausen and Mikrophonie, which is, yes, it's a freaky piece of music, okay? But Karl-Heinz Stockhausen was one of the foremost composers of the 20th century. And he did some wild stuff. He was very into electronics before other people. He had these crazy, wild ideas. One of his famous pieces is called the Helicopter Quartet. And what it's for a string quartet where each member is in a helicopter flying up above, and the sound is then broadcast down to the people below. I mean, this is pretty wild. And, so he had a lot of really forward-thinking ideas. Electronic music, really amazing choral music and music with big orchestras. And he had Mikrophonie. So he picked out this big Paiste gong, just like the Mikrophonie sitting over there. And it's a piece I've actually seen performed live, which was just stunning. It's a piece designed to just explore sound. And if you've watched the video, it's real intriguing. What it is, there's 4 people, 2 people on each side of the gong, with various mallets and utensils, like kitchen utensils and scrapers and things. And then there's 2 people out in the audience controlling electronics to modify the sounds. And originally, Stockhausen was one of the people out in the audience, controlling the sounds. So it's a very avant-garde, forward-thinking piece. But that's Mikrophonie. And it's become very famous because it's just so unique. And the fact that he took a gong and did something totally different with it. I mean, people are up there going, scraping things on it. And then these sounds are going through the microphones and they're playing around with filters and things like that, oscillators, and changing the sound. So it's kind of a crazy thing. All right, so let's just take a minute of silence here and just listen. All right, what do you hear?
Chainsaw.
Yeah, that guy's been really having a day. Yeah, the chainsaw. And John Cage would have liked that. Because John Cage, I'm a big fan and reader of John Cage, the 20th century composer, philosopher. And his big thing was, I just let sounds be sounds. And he used to sit in his apartment in the middle of New York City and just have the windows open and just listen to the traffic and the people and everything. And things like the bells. And he didn't judge them. I just let sounds be sounds, which I think is an important thing. Because if you're playing a session and you're playing downtown somewhere and a big truck or a train or a motorcycle comes by, it can throw you off maybe. It's like, whoa, oh, that sound. But if you just let it be a sound, nobody cares. What I do is I play along with the stuff that happens. Like, if those bells are going, I start playing along with them. Motorcycle comes by, I might do a crescendo on the gong to match the motorcycle. So just let the sounds be sounds. The best one that happened to me, I was playing in this downtown studio, and there was an apartment up above, and we just get to the quiet part near the end. And everybody's laying there chilled out, and the person upstairs starts vacuuming. Well, I just kind of played along with it. And nobody was disturbed. Nobody jumped up like, well, what's that? I just let the sound. And afterwards, somebody went, was somebody vacuuming? Yeah, they were, So you can't control the outside sounds. So just let them be. And just keep playing and everything. Except this guy. I just want to go after him. I'm annoyed by that. Yeah. Anyway, but what else did you hear? Birds. Birds are great. I love playing outside or a place like this. The birds usually join in. And, but don't judge the birds as being, that's a good sound, and the truck going by is a bad sound. They're just sounds. Even this guy, just let it go. But the other thing is, did you hear any gongs? No, we didn't. We've got how many? 50, 60 gongs in here. And there was no sound. That's because The gongs don't make a sound. The gongs are possible sounds. But by themselves, there's nothing happening. It's only when I take a mallet and release the sound, the potential that's there, the inherent sound in the gong, I can release it. But otherwise, there is no sound. People get hung up on instruments. And there's nothing wrong. I mean, I have my instruments, and I have my favorite instruments, and I love to play them. But don't get so hung up on the instrument, because it's just a tool, and it doesn't make the sound. The sound all comes from here. This is really important. If there's only one thing you get from what I do today, it's this is where the sound is, okay? It lives right here in you, in your heart, your soul, your body, however you want to describe it. This is where the sound is. And people, when they knew I was coming here, they were all going, wow, you know, how do you get your gongs over there? How do you fly them over there? And I said, I'm not taking any gongs. First, nobody wants to pay to fly all my gear over here. It costs a fortune. I said, I never fly my gongs anywhere. I just use what's there. Sometimes, I'm a Paiste artist, so sometimes Paiste will provide gongs for me. Otherwise, I know, there'll be gongs. They'll round up some gongs somewhere for me to use, and I will use whatever is there. So if I was so hung up on my own gongs, I'd come here and go, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't do my stuff. But I can do my stuff because my stuff is right here, okay? It's not in my gongs back home. My sound, my music, my touch, my feel, that's not sitting at my house right now in my gongs. No, it's all here. My gongs are home and they're not making any sound. Because nobody's releasing that sound potential from them. So I come here and I greet new instruments. It's like, hello, gong, how are you? I went around and I played gongs and I listened, trying to match up some sounds and that. And I know I can do what I want because I brought it with me. It's all right here, okay? Everybody got that? That's probably the most important thing, is you are the sound. And a good way to understand that is I could have gone over and played the exact same setup that Annika had there, and it would sound different, and it would sound like me. And then Mike could go up and play the exact same setup, and it's going to sound like Mike. Same gongs, 3 different people, 3 different sounds and approaches, because this is where it lives, right here, right? And we all bring it and release it through the gongs or the bowls, the bells, whatever instruments we're using. So that's very important. And that's a big thing I try to impart on my students, is that, it's all here. Don't get stuck on the equipment. I mean, I'm an equipment junkie. Ask my wife. I love gear. I have over 130 gongs right now. Right? And I have probably like 100 cymbals, and I got boxes of bells and singing bowls, and probably 500 mallets. But this is 50 years of collecting too. It's not like, I got this in a month or something. But still, I've got all this gear, and I love it, and it's great, but here's where the sound is. It's right here, okay? And I tell my students, you should be able to go anywhere and play any setup, and it'll sound like you. You should be able to make your music because it's always with you. And these are just tools. As lovely as they are, I mean, really, they're just tools. Just like if you're a carpenter and you have an assortment of hammers. Well, you could go somewhere else and use a different hammer that's not yours because it's a tool. It's a little better than hammers, but don't get so hung up on the instruments. But if you've got them, I mean, you can have favorites and you can really love them and cherish them and that, but you might get in a situation where you have to use some other instruments. You are the music, okay? Don't worry about, oh, my dog's back home and I can't do this thing and that thing. You'll do other things. So that's part of the fun here. Is I have this assortment of gongs, and they're different than mine other than I have a 32-inch Symphonic. Mine is so different because it's old and it's played in and the tone is dropped quite a bit. But I can play a different one and I can still get a lot of the sounds that I like.